Welcome, welcome,
Hello and welcome everyone.
welcome, everyone. We're connecting to audio. If you're out there and you can open up your cameras and we want to see your beautiful faces. If you're someplace where you can't, do not fear. It's okay. We're just happy to have you in the Zoom room tonight. All right. And so, because we like to be respectful of everyone's time, I am Stacy Dupre. Some of you know me from the admissions process, but I am going to turn this over into the hands of our Dean of Diversity Education and our wonderful leaders of the SDC. I'm sorry, I was going to say SDLC, but the SDC. So I hope you sit back and enjoy. And this is really just a brief introduction to the work that actually gets done here around DEI at St. Andrews. So Devin Dupre, take it away.
So Mrs. Dupre, I'm gonna have to correct you a little bit because you've invited our participants to sit back, but I actually want you to be fully participating, right? So there will be some parts where you get to sit back, but there will be some other parts where we're going to expect you to join us in conversation in a couple of breakout rooms to talk about a number of the topics that we will discuss today. So I want to start with an introduction, and I also want to ask our current St. Andrews students to introduce themselves briefly as well. But my name is Devin Dupre, Miss Dupre, and as Mrs. Dupre said, I work as Dean of Diversity Education at St. Andrews. I know I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of you. I know a couple of you were also at the Saturday at St. Andrews event that we did back in the fall. So I'm excited to have you here again and for us to talk a little bit more about diversity education at St. Andrews. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I do in just a bit. So I want to turn it over to the SDC, the Student Diversity Committee members, to introduce themselves. If you can share your name, where you're from, what form you're in, and maybe a few other things you do at St. Andrews. And I'd love to start with our two heads who are represented today.
Okay, I can go. My name is Larry. I'm one of the senior co-heads of SDC this year. I grew up in the Philly area, but my family currently lives in Hong Kong. And other things I do at St. Andrews. I also am one of the heads of environmental stewards. I'm an art major, and I'm a coxswain for our crew team.
Hi, I'm Amrit Chapman. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm also in the sixth form, so senior, and I'm also one of the heads of the SDC. And in addition to the SDC, I am a co-head of the multiracial affinity group on campus, and I'm also on the crew team.
And now I'd love to turn it over to our junior committee members.
Hi, my name is Anya. I am a junior. I've been a member on the SDC for 3 years now. I'm from Hamilton, New Jersey. I'm also a dancer here at St. Andrews. I do tons of sports. I float around, try a new one every year. Right now I'm doing crew. I also am a part of 2 affinity groups, well actually 3, Girls Collaborative, Essence, which is the affinity group for Black females, and
Sapphire.
the Sapphire, yes, which is the affinity group for women of color.
Hi, I'm Pearl. I'm a junior. I am from Massachusetts. I am also a coxswain on the crew team. I'm also involved in environmental stewards. What else? I'm like part of coding club and robotics. Yeah.
Pearl, can you share a little bit about that cool thing you did that has to do with science?
Yes. So earlier this year, I gave my talk at the McLean Science Lecture Competition, which is like a science like competition between the upperclassmen at St. Andrews. And I did mine on the neuroscience of racism. So it was kind of connecting 2 fields that I really enjoy studying. like science and how our body works, and then like the study of racism and how to be anti-racist and kind of how to foster that yourself and in a community. So that's what I talked about.
Hi, my name is Zhenya. I'm from Ukraine, Kiev, Ukraine, and I'm involved also with dance. And right now I'm doing crew, so we have a crew squad here. Yeah, I really enjoy. I joined St. Andrews this year, and I'm also part of International House, as I'm an international student, and I really enjoyed this year here.
Well, thank you everyone for those introductions. We're also going to have the opportunity for you all who are guests with us today to introduce yourselves once we get into some breakout rooms in just a little bit. So I want to again welcome you all for being here today and continuing on this series of Front Lawn Found. I'm hoping that during our time together today, you're going to find out a little bit more again about St. Andrews and some of the work that we do here. So before we fully get started, I want to share with you a little pretenda. This is a term that I'm borrowing from an organization that I've worked with in the past because it's kind of the plan for what I have, but who knows where this conversation might go and the ways in which we may get all of this done and more. So I'm hoping that during our time together, we'll be able to gain a collective understanding of what diversity means at St. Andrews, for you to learn a little bit more about the opportunities we have to engage with diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice at St. Andrews. We're going to get to know each other a little bit by practicing inquiry and proximity. I'm hoping that you'll be able to share your questions. And overall, I do hope that we are able to have a little bit of fun. So if you have a phone nearby, I'm going to ask you to grab it really quickly because we're going to do a brief poll. So you can actually use your phone for a QR code that you find right here. If you are unable to use your phone, I'm going to give everyone a moment just to snap that QR code if you can. It'll be up in just a second. But for folks who do not have phones and want to use their web browser, if you go to www.menti.com and use the code 718-34377, then you'll be able to share your response. So I'm just trying to do a little crowd sourcing here to see what we think diversity is. So what is diversity for you? If you can just share a brief response. And here's the QR code if you need that again. All right, so we're starting to get some of our first responses in. Having a wide, equal array of different characteristics or identifying features. Ooh, I've got a message that came directly to me in the chat. Diversity is in everything around us. Inclusion in a variety of cultures. Diversity is the concept involving multiple ideas, backgrounds, experiences, and identifiers, a collective of people that are made up or that are made unique through their narratives, race, sexuality, gender, identity, etc. Embracing and learning from our unique sets of backgrounds and experiences, different experiences and backgrounds, a group of people who are different from one another. Diversity to me is coming from different ethnicities, religions, backgrounds, etc. It's coming together and finding common ground. Rashawn shares diversity is the difference, which can be ethnicity, culture, background, race, and even interests, which can lead to a variety within an area or society. These are excellent definitions. Excellent definitions. I'd love to keep these coming, but we can read through them. I'll come back at the end so we can take a look through some of these as we go, but please feel free to keep those responses coming. So what is diversity, right? So the students who are here know that I am a big fan of a Google definition screenshot. So that is what you have here. And by this definition that I pulled directly from Google, it says diversity is a state of being diverse, a variety, or a range of different things. And we definitely highlighted that in the definitions I heard that you shared, but there were some other things that we're adding: identity and background, experiences, culture, and all those things are incredibly important when it comes to the diversity that's at St. Andrews. But when we talk about diversity at St. Andrews, we mean something very specific, and this may be familiar information that you all heard in our Saturdays with St. Andrews session back in the fall. But diversity, when we say this at St. Andrews, we really truly mean all of the identities, perspectives, and stories of the members of our school community. It's everyone. Everyone in our school contributes to the diversity of our school. But when we say diversity education, we're talking about the organic and structured engagement that allows us to explore those differences and that enable us to come together even more effectively as an authentic and cohesive community. So it's great to have the diversity, right? But once we have it, how do we use it? What does it mean? How do we make sure that everyone's identity, right, within that diversity is honored as well? So our big goal at St. Andrews, especially as it pertains to our diversity education work, is creating a best manifestation of community, which is one in which every member is valued as their true, full, authentic selves. And in order to get there, right, we know that everyone has to participate. So this is something that we are intentional about. We want to create this kind of community, and we want to do it in every space on campus. So in that vein, diversity work is not separate work. It's something that is important and that we're doing in every area of school life, whether it's in the classroom, in the dorms, on the sports fields, on the water, as our many rowers spend their afternoons. We want to make sure that that's happening everywhere. So what that looks like at St. Andrews, it comes in a number of different ways. So we want to create this community, and one of the ways we do this is by being a community of inquirers, which we're going to talk a little bit about in just a moment. It's also by following our community norms, which you have listed here, the ways in which we follow these norms when we're engaging in conversation about diversity, but how we incorporate these norms in our everyday life and through giving each other grace, right? In every interaction that we have, how can we make sure that we're showing up to give each other grace? So those are just two ways that we engage in that work at St. Andrews. And it takes place in so many different spaces. So for our students, and each student, current St. Andrews student, has done this and has been a part of this work. It's with our Student Diversity Committee. Obviously, those members are represented here. It's through affinity groups and ally groups and a series of other clubs. We have full community events like our MLK weekend, our equity conference, our headmasters forums, a series of different things. We have guests that come to campus that work with us. But I think the best way this work happens is when we're sharing our stories with one another. And that happens in so many different places on campus as well, whether it's chapel, school meeting, lunch in the classroom, if you're in a full school event, dorm, athletics, and even in the arts. These are all ways that students tell their stories. So really, diversity work is happening everywhere on campus. So a bit about me and my role in diversity education. I really see my role is to guide the school's efforts to make sure that our population, right? So the population of our community and the programs we have in our community are also reflecting the promise of the school and the diversity of our student body, right? I want to be a resource to not only our faculty and students, but also families, so that we can collectively create and sustain a community that is inclusive for all students and where all students can be valued, supported, known, and loved. And the other part of my work is also to develop DEIJ programming that I get to do with students and faculty that creates cultural competencies, fosters identity development, and empowers everyone, right? Learners, teachers, everyone to promote social justice, not only in our community, but in our extended community and in our world. So I'd love to roll this over. The SDC members don't even know this is coming, but I want you all to take a moment, everyone, right? We're gonna take a moment. What do you think your role is, right? As students at St. Andrews, what is your role in engaging in diversity work? And then I wanna flip it a little bit to our guests who are here. As future third formers, as future members of the St. Andrews community, what do you think your role will be as members of this community in doing this diversity work? So our guests, you're more than welcome to take yourself off of mute and share. If you're more comfortable sharing in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well, and I'll read what you say. But I'd love to turn it over again to our SDC members and ask a little bit if you can share what you think your role is in diversity work at St. Andrews.
So one thing that I really loved about St. Andrews when I was applying is how diverse the community is, and that was something I was really looking for in my high school that I didn't feel like I had in my middle school. And so as a student at St. Andrews, I feel like my role is to like take advantage of this opportunity to be surrounded with all these amazing diverse people and really learn a lot about the community and my peers. Yeah.
One of the main aspects of diversity at St. Andrews is inclusion. And I personally think that the way to reach like full inclusion is through vulnerability. And I think that one of my roles as a student here, in order to prevail the diversity of our school, is through being vulnerable with my classmates and with my peers, and like letting them know that I'm open to expressing my story in any way possible. And I think through that vulnerability, I don't know, you feel like a true inclusion, and I think it inspires others as well to express themselves, and hence more diversity.
Anya, you inspire me all the time.
Another I feel like aspect of St. Andrews that I think about a lot and we talk about a lot is proximity, which is also a big part of becoming a more diverse and inclusive community. And that is something that I feel like I and a lot of other students are always working to get like more proximate to your peers and to people you've never talked to. So maybe that means like joining a club and just going even though none of your friends, your close friends are in that. Or maybe that means like reaching out to someone that I lived next to freshman year, but I haven't talked to them like in any classes, don't have them in sports. And I'm just like, hey, you want to go get dinner? And just like connecting with a bunch of different people and hearing people and asking them about their lives and checking in. And I think that's like a big part of what makes our community so welcoming and so kind.
Yes, so I would love to ask again, if any of our guests, if you want to share what you expect or what you hope to take on as your role as future third formers at St. Andrews.
Well, for me, I think it's like just like a matter of respect and like remaining open-minded. And like the previous girl said, like making everybody feel involved and like able to express themselves.
Absolutely. There's one message I got in the chat from Brienne saying, I'm only in 8th grade, but when I visited St. Andrews, everyone on campus treated each other as a family, no matter what race or their difference. So yes, family is definitely what we want here, right? And sometimes when we're family, that means we can get together and love each other. And sometimes being family means we got to call each other out when we need to be called out, or call each other in when we need to be called in order to make sure that we're being responsible and doing the things that we want to do, that we need to do in order to live up to those community values. Great. So if there are more ideas you have as we talk about this, if you have more ideas about what your roles will be, please feel free to share that in the chat as well.
I think when so I didn't visit St. Andrews before coming, and I think if you kind of go miles away from your home into a community that you don't even know if it will welcome you, I somehow I had this like understanding that I would be welcomed, but I still had this anxiety. And I came here, and I was like 2 weeks at school. It was my first day actually on campus when we had formal actions, and I have never felt so welcomed actually. And after my speech and everything, a lot of people just asked me to share more of my story, and I think that's kind of what we were talking about, is sharing your story and like bringing your vulnerability to this community, and just this what makes it so so great.
Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. And I think it ties into, again, this best manifestation of community, right? Even as a new junior, right, you didn't have the opportunity to visit campus like many of our accepted students in this upcoming school year. But having that opportunity to, as soon as you were able to be involved, to be seen, right, to have the opportunity to run for this position and begin to engage in the work that you were very excited to engage in. So there are a number of different ways that we can make this happen. But again, if our goal is to achieve this idea of community, this best manifestation of community, there are a couple of things that we want to make sure that we're doing all the time, right? And the number one thing is opting in, right? If we're going to make this happen, then we need everyone to be involved in this process, right? If we have a couple dozen that decide they don't want to do it, then it's not going to be achieved. We need everyone to opt in. The other very important thing is to be an inquirer, right? How can we be so curious about one another, truly curious, right? We all have those moments when we're walking down the hallway and we say, oh, how are you? And they say, great, how are you? And then you just keep moving, right? That's not really being an inquirer. That's not really inquiry. That's a little bit of small talk. But how can we inquire, right, in our conversations? And as Pearl was saying, in which ways can we get proximate, right? How can we truly get to know each other? So if many of you may have seen this phrase before, but Pistis Kai Episteme is our school motto, and it means faith and learning. And I think one of the very interesting things about faith and learning is that if you have faith, right, or belief in something, right, it requires you to kind of question as well. And if you're learning, right, if you're going to be a great learner, then you have to ask good questions. So inquiry is really at the seat of faith and learning. And what I think is very interesting about that, right, is we have to practice this, right? Sometimes we don't always know the best questions to ask. So some qualities of a good inquirer, right, will be active listening, which you all have probably seen before. It's body language, right? You know, I'm listening to you. My eyes are on you. You have maybe verbal cues where I'm saying, yes, I hear you. I can see so many of you are actively listening because of your facial expressions and you're nodding your head. So that's active listening, but really we want to take it up a notch at St. Andrews and practice radical listening. So that's everything that active listening has, right? But also we're focusing on the intent of what someone says, right? Not just the content, but we're listening for both, right? So I want to know when Anya is telling me a story about herself, right? I don't want to just hear the context of the story, but I want to know why she's sharing that story with me. What is the importance of that story, right? If I see a Larry in the hallway and we do that little exchange where I'm like, hey, Larry, how's it going? And she says, good, right? I hear in a Larry, right? Because she's normally upbeat, right? I'm listening to the intent. So maybe she wants me to think she's doing okay, but she's not. And if I'm being an inquirer, then I know that maybe later on in the day, or if we have a moment there, I can really check in on a Larry and really ask her how she's doing. So ultimately the goal here, right, what we're trying to do is practice empathetic inquiry, right? And we're gonna have the opportunity to do a little bit of that in a moment. So this quote by Brian Stevenson is one that drives me. I think Pearl's smiling a little bit, maybe because there's a picture of Brian Stevenson on the screen. We do a lot of work around Brian Stevenson because he is such an incredible leader. And if you don't know who he is, I would definitely recommend you look him up. But this quote says, proximity is a pathway through which we learn the kinds of things we need to know to make healthier communities. All right. So if I want to make this healthy community, if I want to manifest, right, this community where everyone is valued and known as their truthful, authentic selves, then we need to have proximity, right? That is our pathway. So while we have inquiry, the reason we're inquiring is so that we're able to become more proximate. We can come closer together and understand each other better, right? So asking, right, the important questions, the right kinds of questions, right, will allow us to get more proximate, to know each other more deeply. And if we have that curiosity, then we'll be able to reach that goal. So I would love if everyone, right, if you don't already have one in front of you, if you could grab a pen and paper, maybe it's a journal, it can just be scratch paper, it's nothing you have to turn in, but we're gonna spend a few moments, it's actually only gonna be about 60 seconds, so it's very, very quick, creating a short list, right? So this is an activity that I'm excited for us to participate in, the I am activity. So if you can take out again a piece of notebook paper, it could just be a piece of scratch paper. I have a receipt in front of me that I may use right now. But for the next, instead of 5 minutes, we're only gonna take 60 seconds since we don't have a ton of time. And I want you to write down everything that makes you who you are, if you can do that, right? As much as you can fill out in these next 60 seconds. Here are the lists that I wrote a couple of months ago, just of some things that I wrote down that make me who I am. And I'm gonna ask you to do the same thing. So I've just started our timer. And you will know when the time is up. I'll give a couple of cues. All right, I don't know if you can hear that timer. That was a very quick 60 seconds. I'm sure you were not able to create a comprehensive list in just that short amount of time. But I want you to take a moment after you wrote that to just think about these questions. So how did it feel to do this very, very brief exercise? What was easy about it? And then what was challenging about it? So just take another 20 seconds, which again is very brief, to think about what that experience was like. Okay, so in just a moment, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. It's going to be an opportunity for us to think through a couple of these questions and share with each other. So you get to choose. Maybe you can take a moment right now. If you want, share 5 items from your list of identities. And then we're going to share a little bit about what it felt to do this exercise, what was easy and what was challenging. So we'll have just a few moments in our breakout rooms for this activity. I'll give us about 5 minutes. If for all of our guests who are here, if you could also introduce yourselves, that would be great. So in just a moment, you are going to get a notification of your breakout rooms, and hopefully you'll be able to join. Let's see.
So I'm good.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So I hope you all had the opportunity. Oh, we still have some folks who are coming in. Let me be a little bit patient. Okay, so I hope you all had the opportunity to chat in your breakout rooms, to share a little bit. If there are any major takeaways groups want to share, I'd be happy to learn what some of those big takeaways were from your group. So perhaps maybe you can share a couple of things that were easy about the exercise and maybe a few things that were challenging.
We were talking about in my breakout room that it's kind of hard to like tell a story about yourself in 5 words, and like pick the ones that would express who you are the most. And yeah, I was saying like one of mine would be multiracial, but that doesn't say a lot about me. You can't really like learn who I really am just because I'm multiracial. So that was like something we were talking about. Brianna and I connected because we're both middle children. So they're like same ages.
Yep. So it sounds like one of the things that's challenging about this is that just a list of words doesn't quite get at the essence of who we are, right? Or maybe even creating a list of words may even narrow, right, how we identify and how we feel, right, how we show up and feel in different spaces. Any other takeaways folks want to share?
One. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
All right. One of the things that my group talked about for a little bit is like the difference between what identities we project out towards the world and identities that we just might keep to ourselves and that we only know. And like what the previous group said, like thinking about how do we want to like have people like portray ourselves as, or and how we want ourselves to portray ourselves as, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And that means that I think that's very important as well, right? So we have these identities, right? And I'm like, when I write this list, is this actually my identity, or is this the way someone sees me? Is this actually how I see myself? Or right, some identities that may be invisible to some people, things that are very important and are essential to who I am, that if you just look at me, you may not know. We are almost out of time, so we won't be able to go into part 2 of our activity, but this is exactly what we were going to discuss. So Serenity, what you've highlighted is exactly what we were going to get to, right? So this idea of an identity iceberg, right? If you really knew me, right, what would you know about me? What is below the surface and what is above the surface? So if we had more time, what we would have done, right, was take a look at that list and write down on an iceberg, if you will, what is above the surface, what things are at the very top, right, and which things about our identity are closer to the bottom. And for our prospective students or newly accepted students and their family members who are here, one thing that I would love for you to be thinking about as you prepare, if some of you are still making the decision, if some of you have decided and you're really excited about joining our community this fall, right? To really think about this question. I think it's one that we're asking ourselves constantly at St. Andrews. It's something that current students are asking as well. But this question right here, right? So what things below the ice or below the surface, right, that are underwater on our iceberg, right, do you want this community to know about you? Right? Because we're going to want to get to know you, right? Not just at the surface level, but really who you are at your depth. So thinking about, right, what those things might be, and how we can learn about you in that way. And the other thing I want you to leave the space with is thinking about the ways you can develop the question, knowing the things that are below the surface on your iceberg. How will you ask the questions? How will you be an inquirer to learn about your peers in this community at St. Andrews? So I want to hold you to the task, right? Each of you who are here that I know are coming in the fall, I'm going to ask you these questions in the fall. So be ready for them. I know the members of the community who will be here, that you see here, that will be here next year, they're going to hold you to it as well. And I hope that you, again, will hold us accountable in that work, because again, it takes our full community to make this happen. So we are just out of time, but I do want to hold some space for any questions that you may have. Again, you can feel free to take yourself off of mute, or you can send a question straight to the chat before we wrap up.
Well, I didn't have a question, but I did have a comment, and I wanted to thank all of our families, participants who bravely came into this space and who went into the breakout rooms and shared, because it really is an important piece of who we are as a community. And I want to thank the current students who took time, and we know time is always of the essence, and kind of on a little short notice, to get in here with you, because they are really excited to actually get you here on campus and to see you. And for our leaders who will not be here when you arrive, I want them to be able to realize sort of the ground that they have sort of prepared and the seeds that they have already sown, and who they are leaving to water those seeds, because they do tend to come back and visit. So they'll be back to check in on you as well. So thank you.
Yes, I see we have one hand up. Feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask your question.
Hi, this is Norma Hernandez. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to figure out how to unmute here. So my daughter is going to be a third former next year. And one of the questions, and I happen to be an academic, and I study issues of ethnic identity development. And as we looked at, or we're looking at the different types of schools that, you know, that she's been accepted to, and I'm trying to understand the different institutions and how they understand issues of diversity and equity and inclusion. And one of the things that I hear often from a lot of my students of color in particular are, we're really, really tired of being the experts. And I don't know if this is something that's reserved for college students or something that high school students as well deal with. I'm wondering if you can talk about that of, you know, we're always as students of color, and if there's not that many of us, we become the experts in the room in terms of the experiences that we have as students of color. Can you speak a little bit to that, and what type of training maybe the faculty have had in terms of understanding the nuances of that?
Yes, thank you for that brilliant question. It's actually a question that we're talking about often. I know even most recently, as we as a community and as a country have been trying to, well, grieving first of all, and trying to make sense of the rise in anti-Asian violence across our country. and understanding that, again, mirroring what took place back last spring and summer, mirroring what has taken place in our country over many, many years. It has in the past often fell on people of color to be the folks who are educating. I think more than ever within our student population, and within our faculty, understanding the importance that emotional labor is real, and it's exhausting being in that position. And if we are going to be a community where all people again are loved and valued, and we're really cultivating each student to live to their best potential at St. Andrews, putting on the burden of having to do that kind of work is not what we ever intend. Of course, when students feel empowered and want to speak up and stand up and do that work, I always want to hold space for that to happen, but it should never be their responsibility to be teaching the community. I want to actually ask students here, how would you want to respond to this question? How would you respond to this question?
I'd actually love to chime in. So this summer, I feel like was very transformative for me, with just everything that has happened. And it was summer, so I wasn't in session with school, and I kind of felt isolated almost, and like I felt a lot of like responsibility to like carry the weight and educate, because all my classmates follow me and stuff like that, and they would ask questions and stuff. And it makes me feel good to know that people care, but also I got exhausted. And I feel better now that I'm in school, because um, I think there's something really powerful about seeing action being taken rather than like hearing it or like seeing it through like an Instagram post. So you see like especially at St. Andrews, I think like students like getting involved and like trying their best to make sure that like their roommate or their neighbor, like people who live with them, feel like included and comfortable where they are. And then like you look and you see your teachers going to diversity events at school, and like they're letting you know like, oh, like you did like an amazing job speaking out and like being vulnerable, or like when something happens, and like you talk to your teacher about it, oh, thank you so much for like telling me this, like I'll be sure to like educate myself. Like um the teachers here, like they're very, very, very willing to make sure that you are comfortable no matter what. And I think they've been doing an amazing job educating themselves and educating the other students here. And I think the students also do an amazing job educating themselves as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things, again, that is a brilliant question, and it's one that we have to continue to work on. There are many blind spots within many different institutions, that can be, it can be very challenging, on students of color, not just students of color, but any student who comes from an underrepresented group, or a group that is in some ways marginalized within our greater society. So I think, again, in living in community, it's really about figuring out the ways in which we all can truly take ownership over the work. And I think the students do a brilliant job, not only of taking on that task, but holding each other and us as adults accountable and doing that work as well.
I'd also like to mention, like besides from like the racial aspect, I also think like the teachers and faculty are doing an amazing job with like gender identity as well. I've been at St. Andrews for 3 years, and like I've noticed like a change in the progression in the way that we we operate around gender identity. So we often have like class surveys and stuff where like we pretty much like review how our teacher has been doing so far. And at the beginning of every class, when you start the semester, they ask tons of questions to get to know you better. And one question I always see is like, what are your pronouns? Like, how do you identify? And I think that is like an amazing first step. And it shows like how much we care about the students here and making sure that they feel their best.
I so much agree with Anya, and I'm sorry we're like running out of time, but anyway, really want to say it. But one of the books that we were reading, it was an all school read, Poet X, and one of the poems was about name, and I felt really I could really relate to it because my name is hard to pronounce, and that's pretty funny. When I came to St. Andrews, and every single teacher that taught in my class set up in a meeting with me, and they were really curious, and they were really determined to pronounce my name correctly. And for me, it was really, really, really important. I would say even as never. I really appreciated that fact.
So we are unfortunately over time at this point. One of the most difficult things about conversations around diversity, education, diversity, equity, inclusion is that they're never over. And sometimes it's like, oh, we need more time. But it's a beautiful thing because it means we get to continue the conversation. And I know I very much look forward to, I know I can speak on behalf of everyone else who is here. We look forward to continuing this conversation with you most definitely this fall. If there are any folks who want to hang back to ask a few more questions, I know I'm happy to stay a little longer. I know our students need to go because they're already late for study hall check-in. Please let someone know if you need a note for being late. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing your email addresses in the chat.
Good night, guys.
All right, take care, everyone.
Yes.
Nice meeting you all.
Okay, y'all late people, go stop being late. Oh, y'all, wait, y'all already, well, hold on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if there are any more questions.
No, I'll just talk later. All right, thank you so much.
Oh, we have to, I'm gonna send an email
Okay,
with the
Sounds
details.
good.
much. Y'all were great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay. All right, I think I can end it now. Yes, okay.
Okay, I just kicked her out. I'm sorry.